As a fast-moving, high-tech, bleeding-edge tech startup, we want to move really quickly. We want to be able to serve customers. We want to innovate and advance society. We're very generally optimistic in our views and not very risk averse. Whereas, when you're working with regulators, it takes time to build comfort around these new technologies to solve all of the different problems that people have, because at the end of the day, they're protecting a lot of people.
Welcome to Entrepreneur's Handbook Podcast, where we share inspiring startup stories with practical takeaways for you, the listener. Today we have with us Joe Dallago, the co-founder of Rain. They're a cryptocurrency exchange based in the Middle East. They've raised over 100 million. Thank you so much for coming on today, Joe.
Thank you for having me.
So what I want to dive into, you're born in the States, you worked over there, and then you moved across to the Middle East and started a company there. What's that journey like? How did you become an entrepreneur in the first place? Because you had companies before Rain as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So my story really starts, at an early age when I was 12 or 13. I had an interest in computers from a really early age. My parents had the foresight to get us this old IBM computer that was running, Windows XP. And we learned a lot, with that computer. We learned how to browse the internet. It was very early days of the internet. We had dial-up. So, we heard the sound as it was connecting. And I just had an early, I'd say, fascination with computers and technology. From there, I started building, in about the 8th grade, I started building these little games, these little 2-dimensional games. I picked up a book called 2D and 3D Game Programming for Teens by Manish Sethi. From the local Barnes Noble, and just started tinkering around with writing programs and writing games. So that was really exciting and really fun for me. And I went really deep on that. And that led me to different online communities. I really got excited about hacker culture and just this idea of perfecting software, finding vulnerabilities in software, and the potential of just computers and networking in general globally. So I was tinkering around with that throughout my teenage years. I started competing in programming competitions like Business Professionals of America, which is a national organization for young people to compete in various business fields, software engineering included. So that was really fun. And that's actually how me and my longtime business partner, AJ Nelson, started spending time together, was through BPA and Business Professionals America. So that was really fun. And then from there, I started going to a lot of conferences. So programming conferences like PyCon, for the Python programming language, and further learning from really experienced engineers working at all of the big names, would go to this conference. I used Linux at the time. So I was like hacking on a lot of different things. I was in IRC channels and on all of these online communities. I joined Reddit in the early days of that community as well. So I just had this fascination with online communities in general, and gaming communities as well. So this led towards me wanting to create some kind of online community. And I really enjoyed like the punk movement of the 90s and stuff like that. So I wanted to be a part of some kind of counterculture online community that a friend of mine in high school created this forum for a bunch of us geeks at the high school to interact with each other. So that was really fun. So I just had this fascination with like these counterculture online communities, and that in combination with being a builder. My father was a carpenter, for furniture carpenter. So he was he's a craftsman in his own right. So this formed my sense of craftsmanship when it came to software engineering and when it came to products. So that combination, being a craftsman, online communities, caused me to have just a fascination with social media and online communities, which I've since, gained a lot more refined views on. But that really was the impetus to our first company, which was Clusterfunk. So AJ and I noticed that we were interacting with all of these people at our university, but when it came time to study for an exam, we couldn't really interact with our fellow classmates as much as we wanted to. We couldn't ask them questions about the material. We couldn't ask them questions about practice exams or trade notes. So we weren't able to interact with our fellow classmates as much as we wanted to. And we knew that whenever we had a question before an exam, someone in that class would be able to answer it. Someone in that class would be able to help, or we would be able to help someone else in the class with the notes that we had taken. So we thought there was all of this potential that was getting missed out on. So we wanted to create a social network for our university, which was the University of Iowa, that was up to par with the social networks we enjoyed using, like Twitter, like Facebook, except all around academics and being able to, share notes, previous exams, ask questions about the material, and just interact with our classmates in a more intimate manner. So that we built that network. It did very well for the University of Iowa. It's still talked about, today by those graduating classes. And we created a real, community, and it was kind of like this counter because of the name, and it was kind of this counterculture community. So we fulfilled my teenage dream, so to speak, by creating this online community. We quickly discovered, though, that it would need that there were some really big competitors, and we can talk about just our entrepreneurial process and the lessons that I've had along the way. And this was a big lesson, but we basically learned that there was a lot of competition in that space already, and you needed to engage with the university and go through the proper sales cycle for it to be a really successful company. But yeah, learned a lot from that company. It eventually was called Pi in the end, and in the end we were in essence like trying to compete with learning management systems like Desire to Learn and Canvas and Blackboard. So that's really how I got into entrepreneurship. I would say I started more as a craftsman, so to speak, focusing on software engineering, focusing on developing, going really deep on my trade as an engineer. But then with the help of my business partner, AJ, who had come from, his family was very much had a business background, and he was exposed to the world of business at a young age. With his help, I was able to get into to entrepreneurship. And then we started this journey, this journey into entrepreneurship and to perfect and really go deep on studying entrepreneurship itself, which is a different skill than engineering in a lot of ways. But I think they worked nicely together when starting a tech company.
How did you find like the roles naturally split up? Because obviously creating a business with a childhood friend, there's going to be different ways you work together. That's how you expected it to work. And other things we realized, actually, no, you're better suited to that skill and I'm better suited to this skill.
Yeah, I think we got really lucky in that we had very complementary skill sets. So I had come from an engineering background. I knew products and engineering and technology really well. AJ came from a more customer-focused and marketing background and a growth background, which he was really enthusiastic about and went really deep on very quickly. So the two skill sets worked really well together. AJ tends to focus on more of the customer-focused departments, and I tend to focus on the more engineering and product departments.
With the app itself, so how did the process go about trying to scale that up? Because it started off like you were solving your own problem, right? But then how did you get more people to use it? How did you get the word out there about it?
Yeah, so for Clusterfunk in particular, we got to use some marketing tactics that I feel like are not always possible for a lot of, or not always efficient for a lot of companies. So we got to use really grassroots marketing campaign strategies. We basically set up a car with speakers, and I was a DJ at the time. So we set up these DJ speakers and then played music for everyone in what's called the Pentacrest at the University of Iowa. So it's this big open green in the middle of the campus. And we played music, we handed out flyers just to get people to sign up. We handed out probably 500 to 1,000 flyers that day. And I remember we got around 1,000 signups that day for this new service that wasn't even launched yet, but we were just building excitement around the service and also trying to figure out how many people would want this service. So that was a good I think a good tactic for any entrepreneur. It's a specific tactic where you provide a wait list or something for a service that doesn't exist yet, just to test out the interest in that service. So I think that's a really valuable, or smoke and mirrors. It's a smoke and mirrors test where you're just trying to understand like the demand for the service that you're trying to offer. I think so many people, the biggest mistake that you can make as a young entrepreneur is building a product that no one wants. That is the biggest thing that like countless entrepreneurs have gone through. And it's every new entrepreneur I talk to, I try to get them to think most about this because everyone I feel like does it their first time. And I'm trying to get as many people to avoid that mistake and spend years of their lives just learning that as possible. So the biggest problem you can have as an entrepreneur when you're an early entrepreneur is building something that no one wants. A smoke and mirrors test is a great way to verify that there's a cohort of people that want your product. And especially if they're willing to pay for it immediately, then there's a good chance that you're building something valuable.
I think this issue as well comes from people who are really secretive about their idea, right? So because they don't want to tell anybody about their idea, they want to build out a perfect product first, then tell people because they're so worried about people stealing that idea. But then you spend all this time, like you said, building a product and then finding out nobody wants it. And it's where you've got to believe in yourself, right? You've got to believe that you can execute it properly. If somebody else does like the idea and tries to build it themselves, then you've got some kind of a competitive advantage. That means that you're going to build it better than they can or market it better than they can. And I know right now there's people who are going to be listening. I know some of my friends do this as well, where they're refusing to let the idea out there to get the feedback on it because they're so worried about people stealing that idea. Have you experienced that yourself?
Absolutely. And I would say that for 99% of ideas, you want to get them out in the open. You want to get feedback on them. And this is a piece of feedback I give to a lot of young entrepreneurs is to just get feedback on your idea. Tell people about it. See if they're interested. See if they're not. The chances of someone replicating your idea are so slim to none. You have to have almost an identical skill set to the other person has to have almost an identical skill set to you. They have to have an identical way of viewing the world. Like the chances of them replicating your idea are slim to none. And they probably wouldn't even execute on the idea in the same exact way as you. So if they're going to execute in the idea in the same exact way as you, then it calls into question whether or not your idea is that unique in the first place. So there are really no negatives to letting your idea out. I'd say the only exception to that I've seen is there are certain industries where, a certain hardware breakthrough is possible or a certain medical breakthrough exists. And it truly is like a secret that no one else has been able to crack, but you're able to crack it. Those you want to keep under wraps, like those don't tell people how you're doing it. There's a great story around Google Earth and how somewhere in Europe, the Google team was having a meeting with the team, with a company that was building Google Earth at the time. And over a couple of beers, I guess, they shared the secrets of, this engineering problem that they had solved to make it possible to have satellite imagery interspliced across the, a sphere at that scale. It was a true engineering problem, and they shared it with the Google team. And then the Google team went and built Google Earth over the course of a couple months and beat them to market. So like there are true breakthroughs like that you want to keep to yourself. But in 99% of cases, if it's a retail focused company or an app, you want to be talking about it early and often, especially if it's your first company. You want to be talking about it a lot and getting feedback from users, because that's how you're going to test like if people will actually want it or not when you go build it.
Was there any feedback that you got when you were building your first app that changed the direction you were going to go in, where you realized that something you thought was actually not quite right what the market wanted?
Yeah, I think that we also made the classic mistake of we got early feedback, but we didn't get enough. So we were in a situation where we launched to the market It saw a little bit of uptake, but there were some clear gaps. We had focused a lot of time on unnecessary things, and we had to scrap those features to redesign the interface. So we had to pivot at launch, and that took about 3 or 4 months, if I remember correctly. So we also made that mistake. But to also test as you're building your product, test it with real users. And if you're talking about your company or your idea early and often, before you even launch, then you have this great pool of customers to go to for feedback once you have a working build.
And from the app that you built, you then got more into crypto and you've moved into that direction now. Where did your early interest in the cryptocurrency world come from?
Definitely. So we got interested in crypto starting about 2013. We were told by a friend at the start of the year about crypto. And ironically, we actually were on a podcast with Ben Milne, the founder of Dwolla, which is a fintech company. And they actually aided in early users of crypto to gain access to Bitcoin through their service. So people were using it to buy and sell Bitcoin in a kind of tangential way. So because they didn't directly offer this service via Dwolla. But anyway, so we got on this podcast episode with him, and we were actually talking about Bitcoin without really fully understanding its potential. Because a friend had just told us about it like a couple of weeks ago. It was a hot topic at the start of 2013. So we were focused on building the company. We kind of put it aside. We were like, oh, that's an interesting idea. We don't have time to think about this right now. Put it aside. About 4 months later, another friend came to us and was in our office and just kind of talking to us about just giving us a little update. And he was like, "Yeah, me and my friends are actually using Bitcoin now to pay each other for meals or just making little bets, making little side bets with each other in Bitcoin." And he was even talking about building a service for cold storage of Bitcoin. So all of this, like, really just from an engineering standpoint, piqued my interest. I was like, okay, what is this? What is this about? Because remember, at that time, I still didn't fully grasp the concept of a digital currency. So that over the next couple of days, I watched a video called Bitcoin Under the Hood, How Bitcoin Works Under the Hood, which is a great video on YouTube. It's a great foundational video for anyone who has a technical background to understand how Bitcoin works from a software standpoint. And I was just enamored by this really elegant, interesting system and the concept of a cryptocurrency and a digital currency. Because with that video, for the first time, I understood, oh, wow, we can develop a purely decentralized global system that allows us to have custody of our own money. And the importance of a finite currency. I didn't fully grasp the importance of a finite currency at that point, but I understood at least that this is digital money that can be sent all around the world. And this is how the system enables it. And from there, I think what I always tell people is that I got into crypto for the technology, but I stayed in crypto for the monetary policy. So I was incredibly enamored by the system itself and the technology, as a young software engineer. But then the further I stayed in the industry, the further I read on Reddit and other articles and researched the industry, the more I realized that this is an evolution of money as we know it. It's not just an interesting technology that enables certain things, but it's also an evolution on money, and it allows us to improve our the money we use day to day, and also improve our financial systems globally. So it only went deeper from there, and I really started to appreciate the importance of this technology for the world.
When did you decide to start actually building in the industry as well, start creating your own company based on the blockchain and like evangelizing it as well?
Definitely. So the first company didn't work out. We ended up winding that down. We ended up hitting some significant, just industry problems with needing to work with a 3-year, sales cycle with the universities to be able to launch our product. So we didn't want to go through that. And that led us to what was, I'd say, one of the biggest. So the first big lesson, in our entrepreneur journey was, build a product that people want. Really focus on the business model first. and then build a product to solve a problem. I'd say the second biggest learning that we've had along this journey was make sure you understand the industry. It took us 3 years to to go to a conference in the ed tech space, and within 2 or 3 days, we had the entire industry cased out, and we understood exactly where we fit, how we were positioned in the market, and what we needed to build to satisfy the needs of our customers. So it took like getting a full spectrum of the industry with all of the big players for us to say, okay, we can fit in this part of the market, and this is our sales pitch to our customers. But before that, we had no visibility or very little visibility into what the entire ecosystem looked like. So we call it in our entrepreneurial playbook, if you will, we call it casing out the establishment. So case out the establishment of the industry that you're entering before you get there, and that's actually what we did. I'll go on to talk about what we did in our second company, which is Rain. So how we got into the crypto space was we wound down that company, and we learned that lesson that we need to case out the establishment. So going into 2016, the very first thing we did was we were like, we want to contribute to this space. We don't know how we want to contribute yet, but we're really excited about it, and we want to find a way. So let's talk to as many people as possible in the industry and understand what are the fundamental use cases for crypto and who's making money in the space. At the time, there was a lot of noise, in the industry, and there still is to this day around just like a lot of different projects going on, but you don't necessarily know which ones are sustainable, which ones are not. So we really dug into that picture in 2016. We talked to over 100 exchange owners, miners, traders, community organizers. We went to conferences. We got jobs in the space. And we learned about what the fundamental use cases of how are people trying to use crypto today, and also which companies are sustainable and making money. And out of all of that research, we discovered that exchanges are really the foundation of the industry and really acting as the infrastructure layer of the entire industry, similar to the way maybe ISPs were the function ISPs were serving for the early days of the internet.
Because the lessons you took from the previous company, what made you then go for the Middle East as a region to focus on? Like, how did that all come about?
Yeah, so we looked all around the world for a great opportunity. We looked in Europe, in LATAM, in Africa, and we did research in a lot of different areas, but we ended up finding 2 really incredible co-founders in the Middle East. Yahya Bedawi from Cairo, Egypt, was the very first person to start a Bitcoin meetup in the MENA region back in 2014. So he had a group of people that he would regularly meet with and educate about Bitcoin and crypto. He had spent a lot of time in San Francisco during the early days of crypto when Coinbase was just starting out. And then when he moved back to Egypt, brought all of that knowledge with him and started educating people about Bitcoin. And then Abdullah Al-Moyakal was one of the largest broker dealers of Bitcoin for 4 years, from like 2014 to 2018 in Saudi, and also started early conversations with the Saudi government about regulating crypto. So the 4 of us, just all AJ, myself, Yahya, and Abdullah, all really worked well together, and we all had really complementary skill sets that we brought together to form a great team. So we just started kind of working together, casing out different opportunities in the Middle East, and we're really excited about what we were doing. So we decided to make it official, and we all became co-founders. Then starting in early 2017, we gained inroads to the Central Bank of Bahrain and started a conversation with them, which is an interesting story. And yeah, the rest is history from there.
How did you get obviously at that point, you would need to convince the governments or the people in charge of the policy there to help you create this currency exchange, make sure it's regulated, make sure that you weren't going to get in any trouble there. How did that conversation go? Because imagine it'd be quite difficult at that early stage of crypto and the adoption.
It was a completely different time. I think that now it was really interesting to experience last year, because Prior to last year, I don't think people appreciate that for 4 or 5 years, actually more like 7 years, since 2013, I was at parties or in social gatherings and explaining Bitcoin to people and giving them small amounts of Bitcoin. Sometimes I would give someone $5, like 7 years ago. That's now over $1,000 today. So like I was explaining Bitcoin to people when people didn't understand it and they were so skeptical of it. So for a good 7 years, we were really beating the drum on this, and not everyone got it, but not everyone had heard about it or understood it, for that matter. As of last year, everyone knows about crypto. Everyone knows about Bitcoin. I don't hear like, what is that anymore? It's more of like, of course I know what Bitcoin is. Of course I know what crypto is. So we're at a point in history where, a mere 2 or 3 years ago, only a niche group of people in the world understood what crypto is and had heard about it, and now everyone's heard about it for the most part. So it's that's been a big change in the last 2 years. So going into those conversations with the Central Bank of Bahrain, the central bank had heard about Bitcoin obviously before and heard about crypto. They were very intrigued by it as a new technology and a new industry. So we reached out to them, through a law firm in Bahrain and got a meeting set up. We flew over a weekend. We were in San Francisco at the time. We didn't want to miss work. So we left on a Friday evening, flew for one day to Bahrain, and then had to come back and made it to work on Monday at 10 a.m. So it was quite the weekend. And it's like a 11 or 13-hour flight from San Francisco to Bahrain. But the whole trip is like probably 16 hours total. So we flew for the weekend. We thought it was going to be maybe 3 or 4 individuals. We thought it was going to take about an hour. It ended up being 25 of the highest ranking officials in the CBB. And it lasted 3 hours, where they were just asking us tons of questions about all the technical details about Bitcoin, what it's used for, any concerns that they might have. And they just peppered us for questions. And it was so exciting, to be in that room and pitching a central bank for the first time on Bitcoin. So from there, we worked closely with the central bank to enter their sandbox environment. We also worked with them on the regulation that they were forming. This resulted in about 2.5 years later, as we went through the sandbox in 2019, in early 2019, they released the regulation. So we, in essence, helped create a crypto-friendly jurisdiction in the world. And then about 4 to 5 months later, we were granted the license and could start operating.
How was the journey? So obviously you're living in San Francisco to begin with. You've now moved across and you're living in the Middle East yourself, and you said you're going between Middle East and New York. How is that, like, personally, when you're moving across to a new country, a new environment, and trying to set up a company that's going to be doing something quite groundbreaking as well? How was that period of turbulence? Was it exciting or was it quite scary? How did you feel about that period?
Absolutely. It was so exciting. It's been one of the biggest joys of my life, honestly, and been it's just become such a huge part of my life, I guess, this intersection between the Middle East and the U.S. Having grown up in the U.S., the media around the Middle East, let's say, was not very pleasant. In the 2000s and 2010s, it didn't really do. It didn't give a very fair representation, of the Middle East, is what I would say. So going there for the first time, being tainted by this certain, media view, and then realizing that there's so much beauty and tradition and just such a rich culture in the Middle East was so exciting to see. And then as I've spent more time because the Middle East is a very diverse region. It's you have the Gulf countries, which each have their own unique culture and dialect in a lot of ways and customs. And then you go wider into the Middle East, North Africa, and the Levant. And it's such a diverse region with so many different groups of people, so many different histories, different uh, uh, different everything, that it's so interesting to learn about all of it, and it's become just a major part of my identity is my connection to the region. So I it's just really fun for me to go to answer your question. It's really fun to go back and forth between the U.S. and Dubai predominantly, and get to be a part of both of these cultures.
You mentioned as well how you and AJ had built together a playbook of different ways you're going to do things to make companies successful and work out and build. How did you adapt some of those lessons once you moved to the Middle East? Did most things work the same, or did you find that, okay, for this region, we have to do things a bit differently, or that customer expectations are a bit different?
Definitely. And I think you see that in every area of the world. Customers just have different needs. I think the fundamental needs are the same, but the way that it's executed on is slightly different. You have to use different partners, different banks. People have slightly different expectations of everything from fees to speed. In Turkey, for example, the banking system is incredibly fast, where transactions, domestic transfers will finish or complete in less than a minute. Whereas in the States, people are used to ACH, which takes multiple days. So there are just different expectations, and one thing I like to say is there are no global maxims in world finance, because in every country, the realities of the financial system are subtly different.
Were there any hard lessons you learned when you moved across to Dubai, that something you were doing before wasn't going to work anymore and you needed to change it?
The biggest thing that we've seen is that hasn't completely matched our expectation is just the amount of time that regulatory conversations take. I think that we, as a fast moving, high tech, bleeding edge tech startup, we want to move really quickly. We want to be able to serve customers. We want to innovate and, advance society. So generally optimistic in our views and not very risk averse. Whereas, when you're working with regulators, it takes time to build comfort around these new technologies, to solve all of the different problems that people have, because at the end of the day, they're protecting, a lot of people, right? Like they're protecting millions, tens of millions of people. So they need to make sure that the technology is structured in a way that is fair to their people and protects their people. So and also curbs threats like money laundering or terrorist financing. So that process just takes a lot more time, I'd say, than we expected when we started this journey. And we would really call upon, if there are any regulators listening, we would really call upon regulators to just move quickly with this technology, because it's a very important technology to the world, and the faster we start to test it and iterate in the market, the faster that we can bring the value that we know we can to the region.
You mentioned there about being on the cutting edge as well, and one of the interesting things about crypto is just how much is changing, because it's such a new industry. There's new currencies, there's new platforms, like we had the Ethereum merge recently. So the rules of the industry are kind of changing all of the time. And is there anything that's happened in the last year, or you see coming up soon, that's changed the way you think about crypto yourself? Maybe it's made you even more of a fan of it, or you've realized there's a whole new way that it can be used that could really benefit society?
Definitely. I think my views on crypto have gotten further distilled after this latest, bear run, where, I think a year ago you could have maybe fooled me that the idea of like having thousands of coins proliferating in the way that they are now was a good thing. But now I think it's very clear to me that it's not, and that that we need to return to the fundamentals of the industry and really focus on, I'd say, a smaller amount of protocols. There are probably less than 10 protocols in existence today that are truly high value protocols that are providing real utility to people and have active communities. And there's just a lot of fluff out there that people are just trading for this sheer speculation of it. So I think the industry needs to get away from just focusing on speculation and get back to the foundations of the industry, which is how can we enable more financial freedom across the world? How can we give people really interesting financial capabilities that they haven't had before? This is programmable money, that's available 24/7, 365. It's always up. It doesn't sleep. It has low transaction costs. Transactions settle in milliseconds or seconds, not days. So it's a truly groundbreaking technology, and that's the part of the industry that I want people to focus on, and not so much just trying to make a quick buck, trading these really obscure assets that no one is using. So we've got to get. I think this is a moment as the market really declined in the last 6 months. It's a moment to get back to fundamentals, work on those fundamentals to grow the overall industry.
And with Rain itself, how do you see Rain contributing to furthering crypto in the world, and especially in the Middle East? And what exciting things you have coming up that keep you going throughout the business and making you wake up in the morning and be like, yeah, this is the problem that we're solving that I'm really excited about?
Absolutely. We're really focused on access to crypto, and that I feel like has been a hard enough problem, to focus on with all of our time. So we are focused on enabling access to crypto across about 20 to 25 different countries across the Middle East and North Africa. So that really is our focus, and gaining the regulatory relationship, the regulatory standing that we need in each of those countries to be able to offer that service, which can be quite complicated at times. So I think we continue want to be the infrastructure layer for this industry, and provide access to our customers, and also grow into more of a crypto bank, so to speak, and offer a suite of different services to our customers, like being able to earn off of your holdings, staking, being able to spend your crypto. So providing more of a full financial suite.
And what ways are you seeing so far where what Rain's done so far by giving people access in the Middle East to cryptocurrency? How are you seeing that's helped people so far? What some of the customer stories you've heard where they're really using it to the best ability of the blockchain?
Yeah, so far, I think the focus of the entire industry has been on saving and retaining value. So, some of our target market, the financial systems, in some of our target market are under a lot of duress, and people lose money just by holding the local currency. So in those cases, I think crypto provides a really great avenue to retain and save your hard-earned money, and that's probably the value that I'm most excited about, that we're offering, and then also just the ability to have access to these cutting edge assets is really important.
So let's say somebody listening right now is really interested in the crypto space. They maybe have dabbled a bit in investing, but what they really want to do is actually build a company based on it and on the blockchain. What advice would you give them? What steps should they take?
Yeah, great question. So I think there are so many things on top of crypto that are yet to be built. You can think of it as an entirely new financial system that we're building. It has completely different rules, a different set of capabilities, and also a different set of constraints. So I think that there's a lot that's yet to be built, on top, that if people are inventive, I would start building different services for customers on top of crypto. I think everyone needs to stay focused on the use cases, enabling more use cases of crypto. Crypto can be used to do basically, any monetary transaction that we have today, but all of that infrastructure hasn't necessarily been built yet. We're still not paying for brick and mortar payments, at restaurants or or stores with crypto. Remittances are not fully done with crypto yet. We are the different like business transfers, loans are not done in crypto yet to a large degree. So I think we need to just continue to work on enabling these different use cases and have everything kind of foundationally backed by crypto. So I would just say, I think that the infrastructure piece is largely is already getting worked on. The exchange piece, and the exchanges around the world are I'd say slowly getting licensed in all of the countries, and that piece will be solid, I would say, in 5 to 10 years. But I would say start looking for like the layer above that. How do you build services on top of crypto that enable new ways of doing finance that have never been seen before, and that are now made possible with the capabilities that crypto has, whether that's like programmability, fast transactions, low costs, the decentralized nature of it. It really does enable a whole new world of financial services.
Yeah. I think it's interesting what you said as well, because we're still seeing the adoption is increasing. Like you mentioned earlier in the episode about how before you had to explain what Bitcoin was or crypto was generally. Now most people know, but there's still so many things they're not using it for. And there's always areas of growth now, because the first hurdle was getting people to have heard of Bitcoin or crypto in the first place. Now it's allowing them to understand why it's better to use those cryptocurrencies rather than whatever they were using previously. And that's a huge growth space because, like you said, not many people are doing that just yet. So it was really great to chat to you today, Joe. Where can people hear more about you and hear more about what Rain's up to?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really exciting new world that we're building, and hopefully one that will enable more financial freedom in the world and just a better user experience around money, let's say. But more people can find out about us at rain.com. And you can also follow me personally on Twitter, and that's _JAYD3E, or just search for Joseph Dallago on Twitter. But yeah, great talking with you today.